Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome to this talk on quantum computing, disentangling the opportunities from the hype. I'd like to begin by showing you a picture. This is a processor. It looks like the sort of thing that you might find in your laptop. Nothing special. But what if I told you that this chip is capable of doing things which no conventional computer can do? What if I told you that this little chip is one of only a few devices in the world which can do anything remotely comparable? What if I told you that the technological grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and the future technological descendants of this little chip will transform our ability to tackle some of the toughest challenges that the world is facing today? Yes, this talk is all about our ability to compute and what it can do for us. It's about what it will do for us in future. Let's take a look back at what compute has done for us already. Where has computing got us over the last few decades? This is a plot of some of the milestones over the years and the absolute number of compute operations needed to make each of them possible. Note the log scale on the left-hand side. Now, there's no better example to begin with than the Apollo 11 mission, which landed humans on the moon. It turns out that the Apollo guidance computer performed over 100 million operations in the hours leading to that landing. Truly a milestone. Next, if we skip forward some 2.5 decades, we start to see computers beginning to tackle humans at their own game, things that humans are very good at, like playing games such as chess. Now, this landmark victory of the computer Deep Blue against the champion Garry Kasparov took trillions and trillions of operations. And these had to be performed in a much shorter space of time too, with only 3 minutes allowed to prepare for each chess move. Moving again to times we're a bit more familiar with, the advent of modern AI. Yes, AlexNet winning the 2012 ImageNet competition, and by a huge margin, showing that neural networks can beat traditional computer vision. You can actually do this at home. If you've got a reasonable computer and a bit of time to spare, you can repeat exactly what was done in 2012. But if we move on nearly a decade, we hit GPT-3, and this is not something that you can do at home. This is a model which can write convincing human text. It can write answers to questions. It can write passages which can convince people that the text was actually written by a person. You most certainly cannot do this at home because it requires a great deal of compute and a great deal of parallelization. It costs several million euros to train GPT-3. I estimate somewhere between 4 and 12 million, depending on where you buy your resource. And the energy cost of doing that is something somewhat equivalent to driving a family car more than 500,000 kilometers. Colossal. So a natural question to ask is, have we reached the pinnacle of all that we need from computers? Is GPT-3 the end of the story? Well, I think it's really only just the beginning. In fact, it may be incredibly impressive, but if I tell it all about my life story, about my family, my parents, my siblings, my children, and I ask it simple questions like how many brothers have I got, I'll probably get a number out, but it most likely won't actually be the right number after all that monetary and environmental costs. So we're really just at the beginning. And machines answering our questions or playing chess may be fun. In fact, there may be relevant applications which are important, but maybe they're not obviously the most important things. So let's talk about some of the things that really matter to us today. The past couple of years have given us all a newfound appreciation of healthcare, of vaccines, drugs, treatments. We are so immensely fortunate that breakthroughs in the life sciences hit just the right time, but that's after years or even decades of research and development. And it turns out, even if we leave coronavirus aside, not all diseases are curable. Some, unfortunately, have very little in way of treatments at all. And it's not for lack of trying. Discovering drugs is really very, very difficult. Millions or even billions of different molecules are explored in real experiments, in real laboratories, but sometimes that can just still be a drop in the ocean. If computers could simulate in full detail the impact on novel chemical entities, on human biology, maybe we could accelerate the discovery of new drugs. Maybe we could find treatments for rare diseases. Maybe we could even find cures to some of the most common diseases which are impacting our world today with our aging population. Now, there are other pressing issues we face: sustainability issues, existential issues. Our world has to sustain a growing population. There will soon be 8 billion of us, and we all need to be fed. Now, to get the higher yields from the crops requires extensive use of fertilizers. In fact, it turns out that if crop yields today were what they were over 100 years ago, to get the same level of harvest would require nearly 4 times more land. That's almost half of the land cover in the globe. Now, fertilizer is actually responsible for some 3 to 5% of the global natural gas usage. And that's actually translates into a huge portion of our products. If you take that loaf of bread in your kitchen today, some 40% of the carbon footprint is actually from fertilizer. Now, what's so interesting about this area is that nature is able to fix nitrogen in the soil without this great cost. Types of peas, beans, clover, they're all capable of doing this with bacteria in their root nodules. The challenge is that we don't understand these catalysts which nature uses very well, because the approximations that we have to make using today's computers are simply not good enough. If we had computers which could simulate the complexity of nature, maybe we could engineer new processes for sustainable agriculture. Maybe we could also harvest the energy from the sun more effectively. And maybe we could even create better batteries for sustainable energy and mobility. Now, with this great computing power that I'm talking about in the future, there become risks as well. As we get computers with this unprecedented power, we have to think about security. We have to make sure that our data is safe now and into the future. We're going to have to use these new technologies to protect us from those malicious actors who could intercept our data today and decrypt it with tomorrow's technologies. Fortunately, it turns out that quantum technologies will be able to help us with all of these challenges, we believe. So let's talk a bit more about computing. Let's talk about quantum computing. I think many of us have a good idea of how computers work in general. It's all about taking zeros and ones and manipulating them, performing calculations with them. And this is used everywhere. We do it all the time, everything from completing our tax returns to modeling some of the more complex industrial processes that we study within Capgemini engineering. Now, quantum computers are not so different. They involve quantum bits or qubits, and they look like this. We've added the funny brackets to identify that these are quantum states. Now, where quantum states or qubits are a little bit different is that they don't have to be just 1 or 0. They can be in states like this, a bit of 0 plus 1, or maybe 0 minus 1, or indeed any amount of 0 and 1 in what's called a superposition. Now, this is a fun party trick, but with just a single qubit, it's not so obvious how this is valuable. But let's instead look at the situation of 20 bits and 20 qubits. Here are 20 bits. You see, we've got 20 ones and zeros. That's what we have. If we have 20 qubits, the state in general looks something like this. It's all a combination of all of those orderings of zeros and ones, each with different amplitudes. You see them listed down the side, A1, A2, A3, and so on. How many amplitudes are there? Well, with just 20 qubits, it turns out there are 1 million such amplitudes. Million amplitudes. What about if we were to double our number of qubits? What if we have 40 qubits? Well, it turns out then there are 1 trillion amplitudes. And you may be able to see where this is going, this exponential growth. By the time we get to, say, 300 qubits, we have more amplitudes than there are particles in the visible universe. So what does this tell us? This tells us that there is no way that any conventional computing hardware could begin to simulate the state of a quantum computer already at this scale. Now, this alone doesn't tell us that this is useful, but much of the magic in creating quantum algorithms is about being able to perform manipulations on qubits, which take advantage of that huge space of all of those amplitudes. And the sorts of applications are in simulating complex systems, optimizing tough problems, and even bringing in a new era of AI with quantum machine learning. Now, quantum computers are not going to solve everything. We're probably never going to check our emails with a quantum computer. But what we probably will do is start to use them for some of the tough engineering challenges out there. So where is quantum computing today? Well, turns out the state of quantum computing is very mature. The idea is more than 4 decades old, and a lot has been developed in that time. There's a rich ecosystem, cloud hardware, software providers, applications providers, consultancy providers. In fact, you'll see that we are in the mix there. Our Capgemini Quantum Lab, a team spanning the GBLs and the SBUs, will enable us to be the provider of choice for our clients in their journey to leverage this technology. Yes, quantum computing is indeed very mature. Or is it? Well, actually, quantum computing is really just emerging despite the mature ecosystem, despite the years in development. Today, you can use a quantum computer with more than 100 qubits, and that's remarkable. But at the moment, noise levels, decoherence dominate, and that means that errors in our calculations build up. These are errors that today we cannot correct. So it's a little bit like taking out a pocket calculator and typing in sums. And the longer the sum is, the more the screen begins to scramble. And at the end, you don't have any meaningful answer. So it's only possible to do short and simple calculations today. And that means that actually today in 2022, there really isn't sustained commercial advantage from using a quantum computer over classical hardware. We're very much in this sort of situation that you see in the image, which is taken from the 1950s with one of the early vacuum tube computers. Yes, it's really fun and exciting, but it's really in the years ahead that we see the tremendous progress that leads to an absolute transformation in the way the world works. Don't be disheartened. Quantum computing capacity is growing exponentially, and it's projected to keep doing so. It is more than doubling every year, and we expect, therefore, that the 2020s is really going to be the quantum decade, the time when quantum starts to come of age. So let me talk in a bit more detail about one of the areas that we have looked at in my unit, Hybrid Intelligence, within Capgemini Engineering. We've been looking in a bit more detail at the life sciences, about healthcare, about the development of drugs. And I want to introduce you to one of the challenges in the industry. Really, there's one plot which captures a lot, and that's this one. You can see here the new drugs per $1 billion R&D spent across the decades. Now, again, I want you to notice that the scale on the y-axis here is logarithmic. And what you see is that the number of drugs produced per $1 billion R&D spend has been falling decade on decade for quite a long time. It is becoming increasingly difficult to bring new therapeutics to patients. Why is that? Well, there are a few high-level reasons. The first is that a very large number of drug candidates fail during development. So after the initial colossal investment of developing a new drug molecule, when it's taken through preclinical and then clinical trial stages, it's much more likely to fail than not. Of course, it's very expensive, but it also takes a long, long time, typically around 12 years to bring a new drug to the market. And added to that, there are commercial pressures. There's a limited window where it's actually possible to recoup the costs of investing in R&D for new drugs. So patents may typically be 20 years, but by the time a drug is brought to the market, it may be 6, 7, 8 years remaining on that patent. And that's a real challenge if there aren't huge patient populations who are going to get value from that drug very quickly. But don't be disheartened. It turns out that quantum could well be part of the solution. I'm going to show you some quotes. These come from Bhushan Bond, who's one of the leading experts in this area and one of many experts who was interviewed by the Capgemini Research Institute team in their recent report on quantum technologies. So Bhushan talks about how the speed up from quantum computing could save as much as 2 to 3 years from the R&D timeline. That would be absolutely colossal. He goes on to talk about how the pharma industry could really use it to focus on the right compounds, and that would have a huge impact in terms of reducing the likelihood of failure, particularly in the late stages where failure is so costly. So given this, let me talk to you a little bit about what we've been looking at as to why we think that quantum computing could be so impactful. And the natural place to start is the excitement around quantum computers for simulation. This is what's got everybody interested in the area of drug discovery, because it turns out that exact simulation of quantum chemistry is exponentially difficult on conventional computers. In fact, we'll never be able to do it at scale exactly with conventional hardware. But quantum computers will be able to do such simulations of quantum systems like quantum chemistry and indeed materials quite naturally. So there's a reason to be excited. We should be excited. But I do want to caution that we do think this is some few years away. So the team I'm part of in hybrid intelligence, we've been working on other ways to bring the advantage of quantum a little bit closer. And one of those involves looking to areas that we work in a lot already, and that's bringing AI and machine learning to R&D processes. AI and machine learning have had a huge impact on improving processes around R&D. So the natural question is, what could quantum machine learning do? And what we've been looking at is predicting quantities in silico, such as toxicity, using quantum machine learning. The idea here is that some of the tasks which would typically involve lab experiments could one day be done entirely using quantum computers, or if not entirely done, in the short term, be used as additional filters to remove molecules from the pipeline which are going to fail later, to help focus on the right molecules which have a better chance of becoming the next blockbuster drug. And what does quantum machine learning offer? Well, I can show you a few pictures here of what some classifiers of toxicity. The two axes here are inputs from the molecules, and the colors show in blue potential regions of tox and in orange non-tox regions. Just low-dimensional toy examples here. What you can see is that the classical models actually look very different from the quantum models. Quantum models offer us a huge range, a huge space to explore representations in data which are not necessarily accessible traditionally. But I'd go much further. What we're beginning to look at right now is how quantum data could feed into such models. Yes, it turns out that molecules, drug molecules, human biology, it is driven by interactions between electrons. So we really need to put in the electronic structure as inputs into such models, and quantum computers will enable us to do that in a natural way. So that's what we're starting to look at now. This is not the only area we've been looking at. We've also been looking at some of the challenging problems in optimization. What you're looking at here is the core of a molecule. It's an MMP12 inhibitor, if you're interested, and that actually is a biological target associated with severe asthma and COPD. So finding drugs associated with that target is really important for some severe respiratory diseases. We need to optimize such lead molecules so they have all of the right properties. And one of the ways we do that is by considering all of the different fragments which could go here in this position labeled R2, and all of the things which could go here in this position labeled R1. Now, with those little fragments of molecules that I've shown on this slide, if we consider all the combinations and find ways of selecting 10 compounds to go and synthesize and measure in the lab, there are actually a quadrillion ways of doing that. And this is just a small subset. If I were to show you the full data set, which is some thousands of combinations, and we wanted to select the 50 molecules that we're going to go through for synthesis and we're going to explore in greater detail, which is quite realistic in a real world lead optimization campaign, there would actually be one with 100 zeros. That's the number of ways that I can select 50 compounds. Now, lab time is incredibly valuable. We need to use it as best we can so that we get to those leading drug candidates as quickly as possible. And therefore, optimization challenges like this are absolutely crucial. And we think quantum computing could really offer some future benefit here. So it's incredibly exciting. Now, with the last couple of slides, I'd like to take a step back and talk about other industries. I don't want to leave you with the impression that it is just life sciences. Many organizations are starting their journey with quantum. The logos on this slide are all associated with organizations that have already begun to invest, already begun to talk publicly about their interest in quantum. You see, not just life sciences, energy, chemicals, defense, automotive, aerospace, even communications in there. These are all areas that we work in across Capgemini engineering. Organizations like these, they understand that there's a future potential in the technology and they want to make sure that they're prepared for it and not left behind. They want to be able to get involved now so that they can help shape the technology as it matures, so that they can have the biggest possible impact on their industries. And what about us? Well, this is a picture I found on the quantum value chain. Don't worry, I'm not going to talk through all the details here, But the message I want to give you is that there are opportunities everywhere, right from the components to the hardware, which will control quantum computers, to the custom software and areas like signal processing, which are going to be necessary to enable applications to run. My own team within hybrid intelligence, we sit at the space between algorithms and domain-focused applications. We translate between the business challenges and the technology domain, but there are opportunities absolutely everywhere across the value chain. Let me summarize. Quantum computing is coming. The next decade is going to be incredibly exciting, and we're going to see quantum advantage arrive, especially for those who are already ready to leverage the technology. At first, it's going to be some niche applications, and then we'll see a broadening out over the years ahead. So this is a really exciting time for us. In fact, the range of applications is probably beyond those that we can envisage today. We know this from previous technologies. It's only as the technology develops that we start to see the full potential. And there are plenty of opportunities for us to get involved. Many skills and roles will be needed across the value chain. Thank you.